start introducing the speaker. Sir, good morning, sir, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. nagaRAJU garu.
Good morning, Professor Nasimlu.
Good morning, sir. I'm Kirtika Sharma. On the behalf of the participant, I welcome Professor M. nagaRAJU. Sir, I'm profoundly delighted to take an opportunity to introduce you, sir. Professor M. nagaRAJU is a master trainer in communicative language techniques certified by the US State Department English Language Fellow Program. He was a popular English teacher for over 36 years with the additional responsibilities of student advisor, discipline committee convener, and college annual magazine chief editor. He has organized more than 200 training workshops for the English lecturers working in engineering colleges, degree colleges, and polytechnic. He has conducted workshops for several universities and institutions such as AP Judicial Academy, Cambridge University Press, and in many more, and also presented more than 50 TV lessons for degree and intermediate students. His contribution and commitment have earned him many rewards. Professor M. nagaRAJU is a life member of Lions Club International. He pioneered intraocular lens implantation surgical eye camp in rural areas and established a world record at a camp at SGI Hospital, Hyderabad, where 324 eye surgeries were performed on a single day. This event was acknowledged by the Guinness Book of the World Record, and Sir held many important positions in Lionism, including that of District Cabinet Secretary, District Cabinet Treasurer, and Region Chairperson. He graduated from the highly coveted Lions Certified Instructor Program of the Lions Club International and has organized several training workshops for the district and club officer. He won almost every award that a lion can dream of. Sir, on the behalf of the participants, I request you to take over the session and enlighten us with your words.
Thank you so much, Kirtika. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
So I'm back with you all at the Central University of Hyderabad for one more session. Thanks to Professor Narsimulu. I've been coming here often to conduct these classes. And whenever I come here, I feel so happy because I find quite a lot of young and enthusiastic learners, very highly interactive and very highly talented. That makes my presentations very, exciting to me. Before I begin, one or two things. One, I don't know what are the general standard instructions here, but all of you can switch on your cameras, switch on your microphones. You can continuously interact with me. You need not hold back your questions. You need not wait till the end, and you can interrupt me at any point of time, and please feel free to ask me questions. If you have the cameras on, that will be a good advantage to me because I can see you, maybe I can interact with you better, and perhaps we can exchange our views and thoughts a little easier. So as long as you do not have any objection, as long as you have no issues, you can keep your cameras on and microphones on. So let me share my slideshow and then come back to you. One moment, just give me. The topic today is questioning skills for the classroom. So as young teachers, I think most of you are new to teaching. Most of you are perhaps in the first few years of your teaching career, and you have come to the right place. In case you have this passion for teaching, I'm sure you're already enjoying being a teacher, transitioning from the position of a student a very short year, maybe a year or two ago, stepping into the shoes of a teacher. You might have already experienced that difference in being a teacher and a student. So in case you have the skill of asking questions, and if you have the skill of building the potential to ask questions among your students, if you motivate, Professor Nasimulu was just making a mention that the class has again become silent. So you should not allow this to become silent. You must stop me, interrupt me, as I told you already. So the more questions you ask, it becomes more interesting. Similarly, your classes also will become more interesting when your students ask you questions. Let's see what exactly we have during this presentation. Maybe some of you can unmute yourselves and you can tell me what do you expect to learn during this session.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, please. Yes, please.
Expecting to learn that how I would like to form some question while I'm teaching a particular subject or topic. So what I would like to question my students and how I would like those students to interpret my teaching through the mode of questioning.
Thank you so much. So how you can add questions to your class. Right. Anybody else?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, we should learn how to get connect with our students, with our topic we are discussing in the class, and make the class interactive
Great.
through all the
Thank
time.
you so much. Thank you, both of you. I actually thought quite a lot of you would come forward to answer this very simple question to begin with. So, these are a few things I have in my mind and on my slideshow to discuss with you deliberately. I made all of them in the form of questions. You might have noticed it already. So, why do we ask questions in the class or anywhere? What are good questioning skills? And how effective are our own questioning skills? Is there a way we can check whether my questioning skills are good or not? Am I a good questioner or not? Then what are the various types of questions? I don't want to make it a language class, but still I would like to tell you what are some ways of structuring our questions, making our questions. And finally, is there any way, is there a guideline, are there some tips to acquire good questioning skills? So these are some of the points that we are going to discuss. Maybe the two of you who answered my question earlier perhaps have found the answers already. I'm going to address them, and in case you have any other questions to ask also, maybe you can continue adding them. We'll try to discuss them. Einstein said, whenever a problem needs to be solved, I have a technique. What is the technique? Suppose you give me 60 minutes to solve that problem. I don't immediately solve the problem. What do? The first 55 minutes, I formulate lots of questions, which if I ask, I am likely to find the solution. So what do? I begin by drafting a list of questions which will help me find the solution. 55 minutes I'll spend on that. And the last 5 minutes is enough time to me to find a solution because I have the right questions already. The moment I ask those questions and the answers are my solution. How wonderful that is. I think if we all follow this principle, I think we all will be great thinkers like Einstein. A wonderful technique that we all can practice whenever we have a problem ahead, whenever we have an issue, whenever we have something important to be tackled. I think this is one wonderful technique that we can use. There is another gentleman by name Isidor Isaac Rabi, an Israeli scientist. Every day he used to go to school. And when you return from your school, what does typically a mother ask the child? Typically, mothers ask questions like, have you been a good child? What have you done? What was taught? Or why have you come so early? Why have you come so late? Have you had your lunch? These are the kinds of questions that typically mothers ask. But Isidor's mother asked him a different question. Every day when he returned home, she used to ask him, Izzy, did you ask a good question in the class today? Did you ask any questions at all? Did you ask good questions? Right? I think this single hint that his mother gave, this single culture that mother cultivated in him, made him one of the greatest scientists in the world. So, what good questions have you asked? If I repeat this question, for instance, you have already been here for 5 days already. I think today is the 6th day, perhaps, I'm not sure. So, if you've been here 4 or 5 days already, have you asked any good questions during this workshop? Maybe I'll check up with Professor Rasimulu later how many of you have asked how many good questions during the sessions, and maybe we can make a list of them and then we can check whether we are good students or not, whether we are really trying to participate actively in this program or not. Good questions means good students. Maybe at this point, perhaps if you have any questions, you can ask me. Please feel free to stop me. I cannot see you on the screen, but I think once in a while, perhaps I'll stop the screen and then I'll interact with you. Okay. As a teacher, you can do 2 things. What are the 2 things? You can go to the class and you can treat your students like vessels. You can open their brains, minds, whatever, and you can pour whatever, all the knowledge that you have, you can transfer to them, and you can close that and say, okay, you are ready for the world. Go, get a job and then get going. So this is one thing that all teachers can do. There is another way. That's a brighter, better, greater way. What is that? Teachers can ignite the minds of the students. What is that ignition? Igniting is, making them some kind of self-learners, making them some kind of seekers of knowledge. You were talking about research and all that a short while ago. I logged in a few minutes before I started, and then I was listening to one of the students, how you were talking about the research skills and all that. So how to ignite the minds of the students? If you know that skill, I think you are the greatest teacher in the world. All great teachers did that. They create better students not by pouring knowledge, because knowledge is very easily accessible, available everywhere around the world. What the teacher has to do is to ignite. And how is that possible? Igniting the minds of the students is possible if you ask lots of questions in your class, and also if you empower your students to ask you lots of questions. Two things. One, I must ask questions. Two, my students must be empowered. They must be enabled to ask me questions. If these two things are happening in the class, we are igniting the minds of our students. Right. There is a short video, 1.5 minutes. Just see this, but not just seeing this video. You must answer a few questions after seeing this video. What are the questions? So there is a 3-step process that is suggested here. So you have to carefully listen to it, and you have to tell me after the video is shown what is the 3-step process about these questions. Hope you are ready for the video.
I'd like you to think back to when you were 5 years old. We asked, on average, 65 questions per day, most of them starting with why. The average 8-year-old asks 41 questions per day, and by the time we are 44 years old, we only ask 6 questions per day, most of them starting with when, where, or how much. The number of questions we ask per day doesn't increase until retirement. Now, why retirement? Because that's when we start asking, where are my keys and why did I walk into this room? It could be said that we entered school as question marks and we graduated as periods. Now that's depressing. Dr. Jonas Salk, the medical researcher who developed the first polio vaccine, said, the answer to any problem pre-exists. We need to ask the right question to reveal the right answer. We don't find, create, or invent creative solutions. We reveal them by asking great questions. Asking great questions is a 3-step process. You start with what and then why questions before you ever ask how questions. Now, my favorite first question to ask about any challenge I'm dealing with is, what is the result we want to see, feel, and hear? Then I like to ask, why do we want to achieve this result? Finally, how are we going to achieve this result? The order to these questions is very important. Challenge your friends by asking, who raised the best question in class today?
Okay, let me stop sharing my screen for some time there and then come to see you on screen. Maybe some of you can tell me what is this 3-step process that is suggested there. You can unmute yourself, I think.
We should ask questions.
Lakshmi, yes, please. Yeah.
We should ask questions and we should ask what is the result we want to see,
Right.
how we should achieve it, and why do we want to get that particular result.
Is that the order that is suggested, or is the order slightly different?
What, why, and how, sir? What, why, and how.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's good. So any other comments on that? Have you ever tried this process? Maybe you can begin trying it. Whatever subject you teach, whatever topic you are teaching now, whatever in life you are doing, just follow these 3 questions. Just follow this order. First, ask yourself, what is it that I want? What is it that I'm trying to do in my class today? What is that? For instance, one of my first slides today said, what is it that you are expecting from my class? And then I gave you my expectations and your expectations together in one slide. Similarly, begin by asking yourself, what is it that I want? For instance, you have come to this this program. This is called, what is this called? This is an indoctrination program, or I don't know what is it. I think you're all
The faculty induction program.
Induction program, yeah. So in this induction program, if you have taken admission, if you've joined here, first question that you must ask is, what is this induction program? What is it that I want for myself? What are my expectations from this induction program? The first thing. The second question that you can ask yourself is, why? Why do I need this induction program? And what is the significance of this? Why are the universities conducting this kind of programs? Why is this happening like this? Why are these people involved? Why are these topics taught? Why is everything happening this way and the way that it's happening? The third question that we need to ask us is how. That's very, very important. How are we going to go about that? So in case you are very clear about this structure, and if you also give this interpretation to your classes. For instance, you go to a class and today you know very clearly what you're going to teach, why you're going to teach, and how you are going to teach. I think your classes will be wonderful. Just follow the technique. I do it. I've been doing it for a very long time. And all my online classes, offline classes have this 3-point approach, 3-step approach. So please try doing that. I'm sure you will be very, very happy, very successful as teachers. Thank you. I think you have something to say.
Yes, sir. Sir, I was just asking, sir, this is the method which is being followed in writing the PhD proposals also, because in our university, sir, we were guiding the students, and they were having several questions how to write the PhD proposal. This is the format which was given. So that means we are in the right track, sir. Then.
Correct. You are right,
Okay,
Priyanka.
thank you,
That
sir.
also is a very
Thank you, sir.
structured approach to knowledge seeking,
Yes, sir. Thank you.
discovery. I think everything in life will happen much better if we follow this approach. Even very simple things in life, day-to-day things, outside the class, in the class, I think this is some structure that helps us. I am sure you benefited by that video. Let me go back to that present. We are moving on from here.
I'd like you to think back.
Maybe if we come to the classroom situation, perhaps we know why we ask students questions. Unfortunately, again, when I asked this question, many teachers said that they ask questions only to check their comprehension, to check whether the students have understood what they are teaching them. Some students ask some silly questions, like some teachers ask, are you with me? Or am I clear? Or have you understood? I think students do not respond even to that question, and that question does not carry much weight with it. So there must be a different technique of asking questions to ignite the minds of students and also to make the classes much more productive. So maybe you can start thinking on this. Why do teachers ask questions? Is it just to check their comprehension, or is it much more? If you see the slide, you will realize that it is much more. Good teachers ask questions, not just for checking comprehension of students, but they do a lot more. What is that? All this. I'll quickly read what is there on the screen. Perhaps you will follow. To arouse interest of the students. Some questions arouse the interest of the students. To motivate them, to involve them, actively engage them in the class, to create clarity in the class, to diagnose difficulties. Sometimes we ask questions here and there, and when realize that there is a problem, there is something stuck, one student is not able to follow, I diagnose the difficulty and then I move forward. So to evaluate the performance, that of course all teachers do that, examinations, tests, whatever. To achieve success, to create agreement sometimes, to inspire confidence, to increase competence, to empower students. I think this is very important. I like this. Personally, whenever I go to a physical class and then I have opportunity to interact with my students, one of the important objectives high on my mind is to empower students so that learning happens at their pace, at their level, and to their convenience, and it becomes student-centered. When students are asking questions, the whole classroom becomes student-centered. They are empowered to take the class the way they want, to spark, to ignite ideas, solutions, to expand their vision, and to fuel lots of skills like analytical thinking skills, critical thinking skills, reflective thinking skills, creative thinking skills. All these skills can be fueled means ignited, by asking lots of questions. Do you all agree with me, yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Is there any point that
Yes,
you want
sir.
to discuss? Thank you. Do you like me to discuss any of those points that you see on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Which one?
Yes, sir.
I asked you, do you like me to discuss any of the points on the
Sir,
slide?
analytical thinking, sir. Is
Yeah.
analytical thinking and
Really,
reflective thinking, sir.
Correct.
yes,
So
sir.
analytical, reflective, critical, creative thinkings, all these things are possible only when we start asking questions. A problem cannot be solved unless we have the right questions. We saw what Einstein said. So what is analytical thinking? Applying your analytical mind to a question and then finding a solution. So how does analysis happen? By asking questions. Is this right? Is this like this? Why is it like this? How is it like this? Can we do it a different way? So these are all questions that help you build your skills and resolve problems and find solutions. So I think a questioning mind is very, very essential to become something big in life. Right. This is a very interesting story that I read somewhere. I don't remember where, but I liked it.
Excuse me,
Uh,
sir.
yeah.
Sir, could you explain what is a reflective thinking?
Reflective thinking is, thinking to yourself, self evaluation, self improvement, questions that help you become better by asking yourself, am I going the right way? Am I doing the right thing? Am I asking the right questions? Am I asking the right number of questions? Am I asking questions that students can find interesting and challenging to answer? Am I asking too many difficult questions that students cannot understand, answer? So this is reflective thinking. Right, I'll come to that a little later. I'll tell you a little more about that towards
Thank you, sir.
the end of my presentation. Okay, so I was telling you that I read this interesting story somewhere, and I liked it. There are these two monks. These two monks were very, very religious, and then they had this habit, good or bad, of smoking. And they wanted to check with their master whether they could smoke while praying, while saying their prayers to God. The first one wrote a letter, and the master said, no, you cannot. And the second one also wrote a letter, and he received a reply saying that, yes, you can. How can this happen? How can there be two different answers to the same question? So the answers were different because the questions were different. The questions, though they were the same, they were structured differently. The first monk wrote something like this: Master, may I smoke when I am saying my prayers to God? I think you followed. May I smoke when I am saying my prayers to God? Right? That was the question. And naturally, the answer was no. But the second one asked the same question a slightly different way. Master, may I say my prayers to God when I'm smoking? Can I pray to God when I'm smoking? See, the order is changed, that's all. Otherwise, both are the same. So the master said, okay, you can smoke, you can pray to God anytime, even when you are smoking. So, this story helps us realize that if we have to get the right kind of answers from our students, we have to structure our questions properly. Depending on our question, we get the right kind of answers from our students. So how do I get the answers that I want from my students? For instance, here is a list of six answers here. Right? I want you to ask me a question so that my answer is them. The first, let's try one or two. We don't have time for every one of them. For instance, you want me to answer, my name is Raju. Suppose you ask me something, I have to say, my name is Raju. What question will you ask me?
May I know
Is
your
your
name,
name,
please?
is your name not Raju?
Oh, I think it's very easy because what's your name? May I know your name? Your name, please. Some question like this will give that answer. My name is Raju will be the automatical answer to the question. Suppose you want me to answer the fourth one, RAJU. What question will you ask me?
How do you spell Raju?
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's lovely. So how do you spell your name? How do you spell Raju? What is the spelling of the word Raju? What is the spelling of your name, Raju? So maybe if you ask that question, if you know the structure correctly, perhaps you'll get that. Maybe the fifth one. You want the answer since 1976. What question will you ask me?
When did you take birth, or when have you joined the place like this?
Please say
Because
it again.
uh, when did you take birth, or when have
When
you
did you start?
joined?
When did you take birth? I'll say in 1954. I was born in 1954. I'll say I was born in 1904, not since 1976.
From when are you working
When
in
did
this
you start your
place? Yes, when are
Sorry.
you in this profession, or when are you in this particular work or occupation?
If you ask me when are you in this profession, I think
From
for the
from
last.
when, sir? From when? From when?
Okay. Okay. So you are coming closer to that. So the English language wise, if you ask me a question like, how long have you been teaching? Right? How long have you taught? Maybe some question like that will give you an answer beginning with the word since. Since then, since my birth, since 1976, since independence. So the question must be how long you have been. So the have been, typically when you have a question with have been, the answer is the since. Okay, let's not go into grammar at this point. Don't worry. But I'm happy that you are coming to the point now. So this slide tells you that you cannot just ask questions like that. Before you go to the class, you must know what are the answers that you are expecting in return. So accordingly, you must frame your questions. So first write down your answers and then frame appropriate questions that will fetch you those answers. Go to the class, ask the questions, and see that your students give the right answers. And if they do not give the right answers, guide them, help them, support them, give them additional hints, give them additional support so that they come to the right answers. I think this is a very, very important skill that all teachers must develop. Sometimes they ask a wrong question and expect the right answer from the students. This happens. I think it happened to me. It might have happened to you. It must have happened to every student everywhere. So teachers give they make the wrong questions. They frame it wrong, or they are not very clear, or the questions are too very complex and we cannot answer those questions and they blame us. Let's not do that. So we have to be very careful with the way we ask the questions to get the right answers from the students. There, I have only one slide on grammar. There may not be many English teachers here, but still I'd like to help you. There are 4 or 5 or 6 different ways of asking questions in English language. Every language has a different way of structuring sentences. English allows some, maybe about 10 different ways, but I'm telling you 5 different ways, the important ones. Typically, you begin your questions with what are called helping verbs or auxiliary verbs. Have, has, had, can, could, may, might, shall, should, will, would, am, are, is. All these are do, does, etc. All these are helping verbs. So you can begin questions with any one of these words. Do you know my name, for instance, is a question that begins with a helping verb, and you can make say, can you speak French, right? Okay, if I tell you this kind of questions, right? Then there are the second kind of questions that are constructed with a WH word at the beginning. What, where, when, how, whom, whose, which, whichever, whenever, etc. So where is this class happening? How are you learning right now? What is it that you are expecting to learn? These are questions that begin with a WH word. Then there are which and what questions. Sometimes you get confused between them. When you give only 2 alternatives to a person and ask them to choose, you ask a which question. When you give multiple alternatives to them, you ask a what question. For instance, somebody comes to your house and you say, which will you have? I have coffee and tea. Because there are only 2 alternatives, you say which. Suppose you have multiple options and you don't give options to them, you say, what will you have? What would you like to have? What would you like to have means maybe they'll ask for a glass of water, they may ask for a soft drink, they may ask for buttermilk or whatever. So options are multiple. What will you have, or what do you like to have? What would you like to have is a much more open. Question tags. So you're all with me, aren't you? So is a question tag. I think, again, language tag teachers already know. Other teachers might already be using them, but you may not be very familiar with the structure and all that. Sometimes this is not strict grammar, but we just change the intonation and make an ordinary statement, an ordinary statement, sound like a question. For instance, you are coming with me is a statement. Instead of saying you're coming with me. So it sounds like you are eating, When I say you are eating, you are listening, you are listening. So that sounds like a question. It's not exactly a question. It's not a real question, but it sounds like a question. But people use it. So these are some important ways of asking questions. Maybe in case you want, you can ask Professor Nasimulu to organize a language lesson on the art of making questions, and you can have lots of different structures for that. Let me move on. This is not a very important thing to tell you at this point, but still I thought maybe let me just guide you on this. There are lots of different kinds of questions that are helpful to teachers in the class. I think you must know all these types of questions, because your questions must not just be for the fun of asking them, or for just because Mr. nagaRAJU told us to ask 5 questions every day, so I have 5 questions. Not that. So the questions must be properly structured and asked at the right time, the right way, for the right purpose. You must have that what, why, how, etc. All these things you must have in mind before you frame a question. So there are the first 2 kinds of questions are yes, no questions and information questions. I think you know them. Yes, no questions, questions that can be answered in one word, right? All those questions that begin with that helping verbs I showed you in the previous slide are yes, no questions. Do you know my name? Yes or no. There can't be any other answer to that. But if I ask you, what's my name? You cannot say yes or no. You have to give information. Your name is. So that is an information question. So I'll come to what kind of questions are better in the class a little later. Let's just take a quick look at each one of them. There are close-ended questions and open-ended questions. Does anybody know what are these? Close-ended and open-ended?
Close-ended questions are those questions which have got only one answer,
Right.
fixed answer, and open-ended questions are those questions which can have multiple interpretations.
Thank
We
you so
cannot
much.
confine to one.
Thank you. Just adding a little more information to that. Close-ended questions have only one correct answer, not just one answer, but one correct answer. For instance, if I ask you something like, what's the name of this class? So there can be only one correct name. Even the earlier question, what's my name? There can be only one correct name. What's the medium we are using to have this webinar today? So there can be only one correct answer. Who is organizing this program? One correct answer. There cannot be a second correct answer, right? Open-ended questions are not like that. Open-ended questions can be multiple correct answers. If 10 people give 10 correct answers, absolutely fine. For instance, that previous question that I asked you, why are you participating in this program? So if there are 20 of you here, 20 of you will give 20 different answers. Everybody may be pursuing this course for a different purpose, for a different reason. So your answers can be absolutely different, and all are correct. You are correct from your own point of view. Even if you, for instance, say, sir, I'm just getting rid of my college work and I'm sitting here to enjoy some free time. Even that is a correct answer, because that's your perspective. Right? So whatever answer you give from your point of view is a correct answer. That's open-ended. Then teacher initiated, student initiated. I don't need to explain and deal with them in detail. The teacher asks the questions, that is teacher initiated, and the students raise their hands and say, madam, I have a question, sir, I have a question. So that is student initiated. Then there are factual questions and inferential questions. Factual questions means the answers are already there in the text that you have given them. Answers are already there in the the lesson that you've taught. For instance, I showed you a video. I said there are 3 types, 3 stages, 3 steps. And the steps are already listed there on the screen. You saw that. That's a factual question, right? So what I've already told you, it's there, and it's a fact that I'm checking. When did India become free? So fact check. I already taught you, and then it's there in your history book, and you are extracting that answer and giving back to me. Inferential, I don't directly teach you, but I expect you to understand from what I have taught you. Right. For instance, if I ask you a question like the video that you saw, the 2-minute video that you saw, taught you something relating to the 3-step process of asking questions. What level of teachers do you think it's relevant to? So the video does not tell you. You have to use your application. You have to use your interpretation of that, and then you have to give an answer to that. That inferential, it's indirectly taught you, not directly taught you. Then there are objective questions, subjective questions, impersonal questions, experiential questions. Experiential questions are your own personal perception, your own personal interpretation. For instance, if you're teaching this class, how would you teach that? So how would you interpret this? What do you think it is? That kind of questions. So there are various kinds of questions. Now I have a question for you. In case you want to be a great teacher, and if you want your students to be capable of, if you want to ignite the minds of your students and make them think brighter, better, and build those analytical, reflective, creative skills in your students, if you want to do all that, do you prefer to ask the left side kind of questions or the right side kind of questions? Which do you think will empower your students better?
Sir, this right side, information open-ended student initiated.
Thank you
Yes,
so
right
much.
side.
Thank you. I'm sure all of you agree with that. So the right side of questions are thought-provoking, and because they have multiple correct answers, and because they are open-ended, and the students themselves ask questions, they are better. So what is it that we have to do as a teacher? I need to take a decision today that I am going to ensure that my class is full of questions listed on the right side, as many as possible. Right? So if I have lots of questions that are, suppose I ask you yes, no questions, the questions of course are there, but they do not serve much of a purpose. Similarly, close-ended questions, they are not very, very useful if we are considering questions to be the ignition tools that you would like to employ to make your students, become better, right? Become brighter students. So try as many on the right side as possible. We'll see some examples also. Let's just see, for instance, these two questions. One question is this webinar hosted by the Hyderabad Central University? Is that a yes, no question or information question? The first one.
Yes, no
Yes,
question.
no question.
It's a yes, no question. Because of two reasons. One, the answer is either yes or no. And the second reason is it begins with that helping verb. Is a helping verb. It begins with the moment you see is at the beginning of that sentence, you realize that it's a yes, no question. And what about the second question? Who is hosting this webinar?
Information type, sir.
It's an information.
Information.
Again, for two reasons. When I ask you who is hosting this webinar, you cannot say yes or no, but you have to give me some information. Sir, this webinar is being hosted by the Hyderabad Central University. Some information is needed. And the second thing is, the second clue is that it begins with the WH word, who, why, where, when, like that. So it is one more check. So you have to tell me whether the two questions are close-ended or open-ended. The first one, how many people are participating in this webinar?
So this is close-ended.
Close-ended.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. The second one, why are you participating in this webinar?
Open-ended.
Open-ended.
Good. You're all very bright students. I'm happy. Next, you have to tell me which one is the teacher initiated and which one is the student initiated. You don't tell me, sir, we are not in a class. How do we know who is asking? But the question itself will tell you who is asking this question. The first question is, which type of questions would you like to have in the exam?
Teacher initiated.
Yes, the teacher is asking the students. The context tells us that the teacher is asking the students, oh, what kind of questions do you like to have in the exam? So the teacher is asking the question. Look at the second sentence. What kind of questions are you going to ask us in the exam?
Student initiated, sir.
Student initiated. So a student is asking this question. So if a student is asking this question, it's all the better. So your effort from today onwards must be to make your classes full of the second kind of questions, not the first. The first kind of questions anyway are going to be there, I think, at least in good classes with good teachers. But that can further evolve, that can further transform into the second category of questions, and your classes will become much more productive, much more useful to your students. So if your student asks that question, before you have told him what the examination is going to be about, suppose the student says, madam, what kind of questions are we going to have? I think that's a great day for you. Right. One more question. You have to check, you have to tell me whether the questions are factual or evaluative. The first question is, how many types of questions are there?
Factual.
First one is factual, second one is evaluative. Factual and
It's
evaluative.
factual, sir. First one
The
factual.
first one is factual because the answer is a number. You have already seen on the screen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there are 10 kinds of questions. I told you already the information I have given you, and it's a fact. It's a fact. I mean, that is close-ended. That not only close-ended, but factual also, because the fact is already given you. How many types of questions are there? How many? That the word many, how many types itself indicates that's a factual question. Right? How many students are here? When did this happen? What time did you come? All these are factual. Then the second question, why are inferential questions better than factual questions? That is, what question is that?
Evaluative.
It's evaluative, because the student is now given more power. The student can give his argument. I consider inferential questions as more important because he can give a reason. Or he can say, I think both the kinds of questions are similar in some, whatever he thinks the student can answer. Why are this kind of questions better than that? Or why are that kind of questions similar to this? It is evaluation. So the student is empowered to give an answer. The student has to think. He cannot just give the answer out of what he has been taught. He is taught what are evaluative questions, what are inferential questions, what are factual questions, and what are different kinds of questions. But now the student cannot straight answer out of memory, but he has to apply his mind, evaluate, check his own personal perception, and answer this question. That's why it's evaluative. Good. Next one, objective and subjective, not summary, not short answer, long answer. Objective, I think you must understand those two words, objective question and subjective questions. Maybe we'll discuss a little after you answer this question. The first question is, which types of questions are easier to answer?
It is objective, sir.
Objective.
Good.
Subjective.
The second one, which is your favorite type of questions?
It is subjective.
Subjective. Both are short questions actually. Both can be answered in 1 word, 2 words, 5 words, 1 sentence. So objective, subjective, I'm not interpreting it in the form of multiple choice questions, essay questions, paragraph questions, not that. What I'm talking to you is about objective means it's the same to everybody. Right? No personal element. Right?
Yes,
the individual is not important. What is general is important. Specific is not important. General is important. But when you are asking a subjective question, it's my personal interpretation of something, my personal view on something, my personal interpretation of something. That's subjective. So which is your favorite type of questions? So I have to give my subjective answer. I have to give my personal feeling. For instance, the students have gone to a movie and come back and you ask them a question. Oh, if you were the director of this movie, how else would you have ended the movie? So I have to give my subjective interpretation. That's experiential also. So I have to experience that, and then I have to bring my personal element into that. I have to give my own interpretation. I have to end it differently. For instance, when the student is asked to put himself or herself in some other character's role in a language class, for instance, and then interpret something from that point of view, that becomes subjective. If you were the writer, if you were that scientist, if you were Einstein, what would you have done? So it becomes subjective and also experiential, right? I think the last one. So there are some clarification questions and there are provocative questions, provoke thinking, right? So how do you structure a yes/no question? What kind of a question is that? The first one.
We start with an auxiliary. Yes, is it done or like that?
Is it a clarification question or a provocative question?
So clarification.
Clarification.
Because there is no provocation. The student does not have to think much because you have already got, oh, yeah, yes, no questions are structured. They begin with a helping verb. Then there is a regular verb. Then there is an object. There is a subject. There is a question mark. So it begins with a capital letter. Some structure has already been given. The student has learned it and perhaps memorized it and he knows it. And then he just clarifies it. Sir, this is structured like this. It begins with this. It ends with this. So that is a structure. There is no reflective thought necessary there. But the second question is slightly difficult. So what if students set their own question papers? Suppose you go to the class and ask a student, okay, tomorrow we are going to have a test, but I am not going to give the question paper. You have to set the question paper. How will that be? Suppose you ask that question. So what is the probable outcome of a situation like that? What will students do in such a situation?
With the question.
Okay, let's break that into two parts. First tell me, what if students set their own question papers? Is it a provocative question or a clarifying question?
It is a provocative question.
Provocative question. So now I'm asking you a different thing. So suppose you go to your class tomorrow and you tell your students, tomorrow we are going to have a test and I'm not going to set the question paper for the test. You are going to set the question paper for the test. What will be the probable situation in the class when you say that? How will the students be?
They will be very surprised.
Yeah. Some of them are
Very happy,
excited.
sir, hearing this.
Sorry?
They will be very happy to hear.
They'll be very happy. They'll be excited. They'll begin thinking, oh, what question should I add to the question paper? If I'm asked to add one question, what will it be? Will it be the same question that maybe they'll talk to each other? What question will you ask? What question will I ask? So, there'll be a lot of, commotion in the class. A positive, constructive commotion, positive chaos in the class, right? Structure.
They will be surprised also, sir.
They will be surprised also. In fact, I don't know if it's within the scope of my presentation today, but you can try it actually. What you can do is you can ask all the students to contribute one question each. You can make a pool of 50 questions, and out of that 50, at random, you pick up 5 or 6, make some grammatical corrections and all that. You set the question paper and give them. Or maybe you put them together and then, of course, based on that, even if you give a question paper of your own, after that, the students still feel, oh, some of my questions have been chosen. Right? I think they'll feel really excited at that. You can try that once. Okay, let's come back to the class. Okay. Then there are two other kinds of questions. Some are called LOT questions and the others are called HOT questions. Does anybody know what are those two words? LOT and HOT?
Sir, LOT is lower order thinking and HOT is higher order thinking.
Higher order thinking.
Thank you so much. So low order thinking and high order thinking questions. So the name itself indicates LOT questions means they do not need much thinking, much interpretation. You can just directly answer them. It's as simple as asking somebody for the name or maybe the facts, etc. So if you ask for a fact, for instance, how many rows are there in the table that you see there, they can just count and tell you. Right? So that is LOT. Then HOT questions are questions that need a lot of thinking, interpretation, and perhaps preparation, research, and then only they can answer the question. It's not easy. It cannot be a straight question. Before I explain this list that you see on the screen, which kind of questions do you think are best suited for your class, LOT or HOT?
HOT.
Why?
Because it will, this type of questions will encourage the students to think in a more critical way or
Think.
Or
Thank you. I agree with you. But what happens to those not so bright students in your class? There are some weak students in your class.
Sir, asking
They cannot.
both type of questions I think required to ask in the class.
Yeah. Which type of questions will you ask in the class?
Sir, both
LOT
from
or HOT?
LOT to HOT. So gradually it should
Thank you
start.
so much. Thank you for saying that. So, correct. So it should be a combination of the two. Lots of factors go into deciding what kind of questions, how to ask, whom to ask, when to ask, etc. All these are, it's a big topic actually. I'm just trying to finish it in 80-90 minutes, but I need a whole day to do this. So the questions that need to be identified and asked are to be evaluated on these two scales, and we must decide whom we are asking and why we are asking those questions, which type of questions suits whom on what occasion. Based on that, we have to decide how many, where, when, and how, and what time, etc. So let's look at the list there. So there are some questions need some superficial understanding of the topic, of the context, of the text that you've taught. So, I mean, even if students have just understood on the surface, they can answer those questions. But there are some others which need a lot of deep understanding, a thorough comprehension. Unless they have understood the subject absolutely thoroughly, they cannot answer that question. So that is HOT. Then closed-ended are always LOT, open-ended are HOT. Recalling skills. Suppose a question only recalls the memory. I taught you that lesson yesterday. Do you remember the two things that I taught you? What was the last point that I made? Where did we stop? LOT. Evaluation questions like the ones that you've just seen. Which do you think is better? Why? Right? Which do you consider more important? Hot. Higher order. Then answers in the text already are there, and they have to read beyond the text, beyond what you have taught them. So the answer is not there directly. When I was a young child, my teacher used to say, from here to here answer 1, from here to here answer 2, and I have to memorize that and reproduce that in the examination. So not that kind. So if I have to think beyond the text, that is reading beyond. Right? Even a very, very simple, Jack and Jill went up the hill. Suppose, where did they go? Went up the hill. Right? But suppose I ask you, why did they go up the hill? The answer perhaps is not there, or maybe it's there somewhere else. So they have to start thinking, why only Jack and Jill went? Why not others? Why did they not have other friends? So some question like that. The answer is not in the text. It's beyond. Right? Descriptive answers. Answers that just read a description of a diagram, description of a picture, description of some process, description of something that's already there. But the other ones are critical interpretation. You have to apply your mind, interpret that. Paraphrasing skills, interpretative skills. Factual questions, experiential or creative questions. Also, this is the lineup of the two kinds of questions. And again, as you already told me, it's always a good idea to have a combination of LOT and HOT questions. Maybe at this point, if I may answer some of the questions that you may have in mind. So the teacher at the back of one's mind must know what is the level of a student. So if a student is capable of answering only LOT questions, don't trouble them with HOT questions and insult them in front of others and tell them, oh, you are a bloody fool, you cannot answer anything, you cannot answer that. So you ask what level, you ask yourself what level that student is. Maybe 1.1 level higher than that. If you just make them begin thinking, perhaps they will start participating in the class. Similarly, if you ask LOT questions to a very bright student in the class, okay, how many rows are there in this table? Suppose the brightest student in your class. So I think there's no challenge in that, right? I think the bright student also gets very, very disillusioned and then disappointed with that. So we must know, and similarly, what time, what is the best time, how many questions, all these are things that we need to discuss. Questioning skills includes all that. Okay, I'm going to show you this question and you have to tell me the answer to this. I'm going to give you some 4 answers to that. It needs a little time to think. I'll give you 1 minute and maybe you can carefully think and then give your answer. The question is, if you are presenting this webinar, the one that I'm presenting now, what else would you have added to this? This is a question. You don't need to answer the question. You have to tell me what kind of a question is this. And the possible answers are, it is a yes-no question, factual question, open-ended question, all 3. So is it yes, no, factual and open-ended question, or is it information come factual come close-ended question? Is it experiential come open-ended come information question? Is it information come close-ended come experiential question? Think, don't immediately answer, take 40-50 seconds, think, and then one of the 4 is the correct answer. You have to tell.
So C,
The question is,
experiential open-ended information.
thank you. Who else? Any other answers?
This is
You are very quick.
and experiential and informative.
Good.
I also think
Anyone
is the option C, experiential,
Correct.
open-minded information.
Right. What about others? I got only 3 people answering.
C, experiential open-ended information.
Right.
Option C, sir.
Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Even those perhaps you have not answered yet are working on that. And because every one of you gave me the right answer, I think I can move on. This question is experiential because I am asking you for your personal opinion. What else would you have added? Then it's open-ended because multiple answers are possible, multiple correct answers are possible. Everyone can give one's own answer. And it is not a yes-no question, it's information question because you cannot answer it in one word. You have to give an explanatory, descriptive answer to that. So C is the correct answer. Thank you. I think you have understood the various kinds of questions very easily. I'm very happy that it has served its purpose. This I'll not go into detail. I think it's already 10:55 now. What I'll do is, some of you perhaps already know what is that Bloom's taxonomy. I will not repeat that. I will not bring the entire thing to the context now, but perhaps you've already been taught that, or maybe during this induction program sometime or the other it will be referred to by somebody else or the other. So don't worry too much about that, but interpret that LOT questions and HOT questions that Bloom's taxonomy. So whatever is at the bottom, whatever skills, right, relate to the bottom part of the Bloom's taxonomy, like remembering, understanding, and to some extent applying, are LOT questions. So if you are asking them to describe something, explain something, estimate something, or even predict something, it's mostly LOT. But if you ask them to critique something, if you ask them to evaluate something, to draw conclusions, to construct a plan, to design something, to produce something, and sometimes to compare or contrast, to deconstruct something. So when you are asking students to do something of a higher order in the Bloom's taxonomy, so naturally you are constructing HOT questions. So I think there must be a gradual movement depending on, maybe you can do some kind of an evaluation of your class and you can check what level. Maybe whenever you go to a new class, the first few hours, first few days, you can spend in evaluating them directly, indirectly, formally, informally, and then you can check what is their comprehension level and what is their intelligence level. And based on that, perhaps you can start asking them the right kind of questions, right level of questions. Okay, I think this will help you. This is important. Maybe you can. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions. I'll give you 2 minutes time. What you do is you give yourself 10 marks for each question, right? And you rate yourself. You rate yourself on a 10-point scale. For instance, the first one, I begin, I continue, and I close every one of my classes with questions. That means every day I ask questions at the beginning of the class, during the class, at the end of the class, I have lots of questions. So I rate myself. Oh no, I do it very, very frequently. That's why I give myself 7 marks, 10 marks, 5 marks, 2 marks, whatever. So like that, for every question, you have 10 marks. At a 10-point scale, you rate yourself and you add up those total score and tell me. I'll give you 2-3 minutes. 3 minutes. Maybe we can read them together. What are good questioning skills is the title of this slide. The first question on a 10-point scale to be evaluated is, I begin, continue, and close with questions. The second question is, I ask more open-ended questions than close-ended questions. The third question is, I use simple, precise language when I ask questions in my class. The fourth one is, I involve all students and sometimes plan collaboration. They can talk to each other, group formation, pair formation, and they can answer the question instead of individual. Then the next one, I acknowledge all responses, good, bad, whatever. The next one, I paraphrase and rephrase the correct answers given by my students. When they give a good answer, I paraphrase it so that every student hears it clearly. The last one, I encourage and allow questions from the students. So if you have started evaluating your own classroom performance as a questioning teacher or a teacher who empowers students to ask questions. Maybe you can begin giving me your scores.
So 56 total score.
Okay, good. You have to tell
Mr.
me your name
Tanushree
also. I can't see
Sarkar.
you. I'm sorry. Right. Thank you. Some more responses. Anyone else?
So some of us are posting responses in the chat box.
Oh, I see. Can you read the chat? What I'll do is maybe I'll stop sharing for a minute. I'll come back to the main screen. I think I can go to the chat box here. Yes, I can see some answers here. Yes. Indu Sukumar said 58 to 60. Why is it 58 to 60? Maybe it can
Sometimes
be 50.
I do something, sometimes I may not, so I'm not too sure if I do it all the time.
Okay, thank you, Indu. Kirtika Sharma says 63. Oindri Roy says 60. Dinesh Kumar says 65. I'm very happy because most of you score very high on this scale because I taught the same topic on 2 or 3 other occasions earlier in some other areas, some other places, and the scores were very low. I'm very happy that you're all very, I mean, highly skilled in the art of asking questions. Anjum Dahwe says 62, Dinesh Kumar 65, Leena Dhingla says 60. I think these are all very good scores. I think if you have a little more scope to improve and make it 70 as well, why not? Try that. And also, after you go back home or after you have made the next class when you go back to your college, get one of your lectures video recorded. Maybe you can just have your own video, mobile video, and then you can just put it on a stand and then record your class. And then at the end, you can analyze yourself. Are you really scoring this high, or is there a scope for you to improve on any one of those areas? I think there's plenty that you can do to make yourself a better teacher. I'm very happy. Thank you. And 72. How is that, Priyanka Dev? That's not possible. The highest score is 70. 7 questions into 10 marks each. Ram Naik 60. Somebody has
Sir, I didn't mean that, sir. My mistake it has been I was typing
no
something else.
issues, no issues. I understand. Some totaling error,
So
it can be.
kindly cancel it, sir. I'm just canceling it.
No problem, no problem. I know some of us are not good at maths. I am one. I am poor at
So
maths.
I have a question, if I may, sir.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So generally what I do is I gauge the level of the class, and then even my questions that I frame in the class are according to that. But sometimes I think that leads to, the content kind of suffers in a way. You want them to have higher order thinking, but because the level of the class is not as much, you are trying to bring down your own standards in a way, right? So how do I transition? The struggle I face is when I have to transition to bring them to the higher order thinking. So that's the intent. At the end of the day, you want them to push their limits and try and do better than what they were at the beginning of the semester. So the struggle is with the transition. So I can identify the level of the students and I can cater to them according to that. But while pushing the limits, they somehow lose it. They were not able to understand the meaning of what it is and how do I bring them there. I hope you got it.
Thank you, Indu, for giving me an opportunity to explain that. And that's a very good question, actually. In fact, the whole purpose of this presentation today is that to help us transition our students to the next level, to help make our classes a little more productive, a little more rewarding, a little more satisfying by way of asking more useful, relevant, constructive questions in the class. I know in the beginning, I mean, any class will not automatically come forward to participate and come forward to, because we have been brought up in a culture where opening the mouth, asking a question in the class are some kind of taboo. When I was a student 60 years ago, 70 years, I'm 70 now. So when I went to school 60 years ago, so no teacher ever encouraged us to ask a question in the class. No teacher ever encouraged us to open our mouths. In fact, there were warnings like, if you open your mouth in the class, I'll cut your tongue. This was a favorite way one teacher always scolded us. So that was the culture in which we grew up. So it's not easy to transform our students to that level. It's a very gradual process. Maybe the next few of my slides have some tips on that. I'll share them with you. But otherwise also, so you have to be patient. You have to be patient. You have to be constantly striving to improve the level. I mean, bit by bit. And you have to be, you have to help students take you into confidence, and you have to take them into confidence, and you have to build a rapport with them. And they must feel that asking a question is encouraged. And if I do not know an answer, people will not laugh at me, people will not discourage me, and people are with me. And here is somebody who is like my own member of my family. This teacher helps me. I mean, once they build that kind of a emotional rapport with you, I think it becomes easier for you. There are lots of other things. Maybe we will discuss them today or some other time. There are a few other slides. Perhaps you will find answer to your question here also.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. Thanks, sir.
Right. So I was here. So these were the kinds of questions that will perhaps help you evaluate yourself. And once you know your score, perhaps you also know how to improve them. You can have a strategy to, for instance, if you are not using simple, precise language, and if you're scored low on that, maybe you have to improve your language skills, and then you have to reconstruct your sentences in a simpler way so that your students follow. Maybe you're not paraphrasing your correct answers. Once the student gives the right answer, no, so there is one student sitting at the back and is given a correct answer. The teacher has heard it. Okay, you move on to the next question. But what happens to the other students? They do not get the right answer unless you have repeated it, unless you have rephrased it, unless you have paraphrased it. So all these are techniques that every teacher can use. Let's move on. Right. So here are some answers to that. Your question, Indu. What are a few good manners that I can inculcate in myself? Right, so that my students ask me more questions, I'll have more opportunities to ask questions, and my class becomes more productive. What are a few things that I need to do? First thing, I must be open-minded. Right? What is that open-mindedness? Open-mindedness includes a willingness to accept multiple answers, even wrong answers. So there is a way to handle wrong answer. Maybe I'll talk about that also. Suppose a student gives me a wrong answer. So I should not insult, I should not discourage, or I should not stop and then move on to the next student immediately. I can give that student one more opportunity. Maybe the student knows the answer, but I did not ask the question right, or my question was not properly understood, or maybe the student was not paying full attention to me when I asked him that question. So there can be a lot of other possibilities. It's not just that he did not know the answer. He did not know the answer is one possibility, but there can be any 10 other possibilities. So I have to be open-minded, especially when I ask open-minded questions, open-ended questions. So I must be willing to accept lots of answers. I must not immediately jump to the conclusion. No, that's wrong. It's not wrong. From this, I asked him, how do you feel? What do you do that? Or how do you respond to that? So if he says something from his point of view, even if it sounds a little wild and unpractical, impracticable, I should still be open-minded. Right. The second thing, I, as a teacher, should ask only relevant, useful, very specific questions. The more complex my questions are, the less participation there will be. So typically, you should not get there should not be too many occasions when students should ask you, Madam, I have not understood your question. Will you please repeat that? Even today, it happened to me also. Once somebody asked me to repeat the question. So if that happened, I should immediately ask myself, have I asked my question? Was there anything wrong in the way I asked my question? Why do I have to repeat the question more? So maybe next time if I do that, I have to reframe my question like this, right? So ask only relevant to the topic, relevant to the context, etc. Then ask logical, informed questions. First, I must know the answer to that. I must know it thoroughly when I ask a question. After somebody has answered, and then ask for a further clarification. If I say I do not know that, it won't look good. So when a student directly asks me a question, if I say I don't know the answer, I'll check and get back to you tomorrow, that's okay. But I ask a question and I myself do not know the answer, or I asked a question, there is a supplementary question to which I do not know the answer, it may not look good. And don't embarrass students. Some to teachers, I don't know in this generation if it happens, but especially when we were younger, a lot of teachers used to insult us, embarrass us, and they used to poke fun at us, and anybody who did not answer, no, so they would be punished and they would be asked to stand out in the sun, and then lots of other kinds of harassment. So I don't think that kind of a environment exists today, but still we must be very careful. Don't be too very aggressive. Some teachers ask questions as if they are going to pounce upon the students and then hunt them. The tone and the posture or the way they ask the questions are too very intimidating. So it should not be like that. And don't be too very argumentative also. Whenever a question and answer develop into some kind of an argument, we can tell the student, okay, let's discuss it later. Please come to the staff room and we are going to have a private talk. I will discuss it with you exclusively later. Let's not disturb the class. Some such things. So some techniques can be used to avoid arguments in the class. Sometimes arguments happen between two students. One student gives one answer and the other student gives another answer, like on a TV debate, right? So two people start arguing with each other, and in the beginning it may be a little fun, but later it raises the temperature, and it may lead to some unpleasant situations also. Avoid that. And when a student is trying to answer, when a student is answering, don't interrupt. Let them complete. See, students unfortunately do not get enough opportunity to participate in a class. And even this little opportunity is taken away before the student is completed, before the student is framing, while the student is framing the sentence. It takes a few seconds longer than you expect him to take, and then if you take away that opportunity, that will be very harsh and cruel. So don't do that. Don't interrupt. Listen, I know personally, I've seen many teachers, they ask a question and they look away. When the student is answering that question, they don't even look at the student. So, how unkind that is. So I think we have a moral responsibility to look into the eyes of the student while he's answering that question, and meet his eyes, listen to him carefully, and give some response to that, positive, whatever. And then this is how a student can feel comfortable when he answers the question, and he will ask more questions or he'll give more answers. There is something called a wait time. After you asked a question, if the question is very easy, if it can easily be answered, if it's a factual question, if it is a yes/no question, or even if it's an information question, but the information is already there and then it's easy to take out from the text, I think you need not wait anytime. You ask a question and you ask for the response. You might have noticed already when I asked that question to evaluate yourself, how much time did I give you? I gave you 2 minutes, 120 seconds. Why? Because I know that that's the kind of time that you need to do that. Otherwise, you cannot do that. But at the end of the 120th second also, 3 or 4 people answered. Some people needed more time. Right? So you must know how much time your students need to answer the questions, and be patient till then. And you can also announce the time. Oh, I'm giving you 30 seconds. I'm giving you 5 seconds. You have 30 minutes to answer these questions, like that. What kind of questions need much longer to answer? You have to have an idea of this. You need not tell me now, but you can evaluate. And what kind of questions need a whole lifetime to answer? There are some questions that need a whole life. Is not Gautama Buddha went into a forest and I think meditated for, I don't know how long, but several decades, I think. So he meditated for several decades to find answer to one question. So there are that kind of questions also. For instance, you cannot expect your students to answer them immediately. So what does life mean to you? What do you want out of your life? What do you want to be? Some such question is, it cannot be an instantaneous answer. But some teachers do that mistake. what is that? They ask you some questions like, what do you want from your life? What do you want to make out of your life? So, I mean, is it some answer that I can give you? All of a sudden, no. Then why should the teacher know this difference? Because the teacher benefits by giving them the appropriate time. Better answers are possible, and some of them can be given as overnight homework. Some of them can be given as lifetime tasks. You don't need to answer me, but start thinking on that. For instance, if I have given you this lesson, do I immediately get results from you? I asked you to go back to the college, video record one of your lessons, and evaluate your own presentation, and ask yourself if you have rated yourself objectively, and if it needs any further re-evaluation, and how to improve. So that is something that cannot happen today. That happens only when you go back to your college. So that kind of knowledge. Then there are what are called classroom questions. All teachers, especially when your students come to college for the first time, or when they come to the university for the first time, and when they change their medium of instruction, they come from vernacular mediums and they come to an English medium class. Many times they have the right questions, they want to ask questions, but they don't ask questions because they don't know the language. They don't know how to make a sentence, or they don't have the confidence to ask a question. They feel that people might laugh at their questions. All kinds of possibilities are there. So one way to overcome that problem is devote one of your first classes every year. When you go to a new class, at least 10 minutes of your first class can be dedicated to giving them some structures, some templates, which can be used by students too. For instance, this is from an English class, for instance. Suppose I am in English class and my students do not know what is the spelling of a word, how to spell a certain word. So suppose you do not know the spelling of a word, maybe you can say, how do you spell the word question? How do you spell the word classroom? How do you spell the word Hyderabad? Suppose I give them this structure and I tell my students, so whenever you don't know the spelling of a word, please ask me by using this structure. So the student is a little more comfortable. Now that he has a structure, structure is not the problem. The only thing is confidence is the problem, or his willingness to ask a question is a problem. So now I gradually build this. So I think these templates will help. This is only a very short list. There can be hundreds of them. You can teach them whatever suits your subject and your context and your level. These are some very basic ones. Then you can again evaluate yourself. You can take a picture of this and then perhaps you can do it later. Some questions that help your students think. This also partly answers the question that you asked me towards the end of the previous part of the session. So if you ask these questions, what do you think? Why do you think like that? How do you know that that is correct, that's wrong, that's that way, that's like that? Can you tell me more about that? So that's good. That's very good. You made a very good comment. Your answer is right. But can you tell me a little more? So you're making the student to think. So what questions do you still have unanswered? Is there a question that still needs to be answered? Do you want to know anything more about that? Suppose these 5 or 6 kinds of questions that you often give you in a class, you ask in a class, you are provoking the thinking levels of your students. I think this answers your question. So how to move to the next level? There are students who ask only one level of questions, who answer only one level of questions, and you want them to move to the next level. So these are the things that you can do. So this question, for instance, what do you think? Okay, Shakespeare said that, but what do you think? Right, the book says this, but what do you think? Okay, this is how it's manufactured. What do you think? Oh, this is how the phone is built. What do you think? Right? This is how the lesson is structured. What do you think? Do you think differently? Do you think something else? Or do you think this is okay, this is good, this is bad? Right? So in case you have questions like this in your class, your students will certainly be empowered to ask more questions. And I think I've come to the end of my presentation, the last 1 or 2 slides. So if you want to ask better questions, these are a few tips. I think they are given in different formats already during my talk, but still perhaps the last one, accept I don't know as an answer. If some students say, Madam, I do not know the answer, I mean, that's okay. That's good. No, the student has, factually said and very, very boldly accepted that he does not know the answer. And when he said that he does not know that, why do you not know? Have you not been listening to me? What have you been doing? Some say, I think that this is only, this is useless. That distances your student further away. So the student said, I don't know. Maybe you can find out the reason and then you can try to overcome that. Right? So this is the last slide. And I think I leave this with you, but this is very important. I'd like to spend 1 or 2 minutes on this self-evaluation questions that help you become a better teacher. So the 7 questions that I gave you perhaps are only a short list of what you can evaluate yourself on. But more important than that, you have to constantly, perhaps every day, perhaps after every class, you have to self-evaluate. What is that self-evaluation? Have I done it well? Could I have done it better? Could I ask a different question? Could I ask that question differently? Right? Should I have had more questions? Or was this question really necessary? Could I have avoided that question? How would it have been if I had started the class with a question today? Oh, I did not have any questions at the end because I had some problem with the time. But would the class have been better if I had ended it with a question? Am I giving any questions for them to think over before they come to the next class like this? So it's a constant self-evaluation. The more questions I ask myself, the better I am as a teacher. When I am a better teacher, my students are bound to be better, because the whole purpose of being a better teacher is to benefit our students. So to become a better teacher, I need to have a lot of self-evaluation. Thank you very much. What's my mail ID? This is my mail ID, lionnagaraaju@gmail.com. And the slideshow that you saw is available at slideshare.net/lionnagaraaju. You can visit again in case you want to use the slides. You are welcome to do that. We have some 8 minutes to go. In case you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. If you have any points to make, feel free to ask me. I've come back to the main page, so I can see you now. You can have your cameras on, and you can interact with me. You can share your thoughts with me. Or if you have any further questions about what I taught you, please feel free to ask me.
So could you please share the link from where we could get your slides again?
Slideshare.net
Okay.
/lionnagaraaju.
All right. Thank you so much.
Not only this slideshow, all my slideshows are there. Hundreds.
So please, once again,
slideshare.net/lionnagaraaju /lionnagaraaju.
Can I share it on the chat box if you don't mind, for the benefit of the audience?
I'm doing it. Yes, in the meanwhile, any questions? I've shared it on the chat box, and you can click the link and go there, and then you can also copy it down and visit all my slideshows.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, can I ask you a question?
Please.
Yeah, I tend to think that anything that is positive in universal terms, we might encounter problems. Because the way people talk, communicate, ask questions also may vary from place to place, culture to culture, community to community. Should that problem also be addressed? And if we have to do it, how do we do it?
Totally agree with you. I think culture and context play a very, very important role in deciding how many questions, what kind of questions, what pace, what level, all these things. See, for instance, if you are working in a rural area or an urban area, an English-speaking culture or a non-English-speaking culture, a certain religion or some other religion, all these things decide what happens in the class in what format. So a teacher can be a great teacher only if that teacher knows. I mean, she does not demonstrate them, but at the back of her mind, she has all these things. So she uses all these contextual information, contextual data. She keeps it at her back of mind, and she uses that when she goes to the class and then does something, including asking questions. Any other question?
Hello, sir. This is
Yes.
Oindri. Sir, thank you for your lecture, sir. So I would just like to ask this. You were speaking about empowering students, and from my experience, what I feel is that especially when the students come in their UG first years, or sometimes even in their PG first years, what I feel is that for 12 years in terms of their school education, they have been asked to keep quiet in class. The students all kind of believe that they should be silent in the presence of the teachers. So is there anything that we can do to give them that kind of an initiative that especially in the initial stages for the UG first years especially, what can we do? Are there any specific steps that we can follow so that they can be given that momentum before they start out to change?
Thank you, Andre. I think you already had 2 or 3 classes on being a better teacher, being a better classroom performer, some kind of topics. I saw the list of the topics. I think you might have already got lots of tips on how to be a more friendlier. I mean, there is a lot of difference between being a friend and being friendly. Don't be a friend of your student, but you can always be friendly with them, and let students feel that here is someone in whom we can confide, with whom you can share things, and here is a teacher who does not insult us for your ignorance and who encourages us to learn. So the moment a student feels that comfort, so once that comfort level is higher, I think students automatically begin interacting with you. I mean, this is a very slow process because they have come from a background where, as you and I both share similar experiences, we were not allowed to open our mouths. From that to this is a big transition. It's some kind of a transformation that has to happen. And it will happen in case we create that atmosphere, that environment in our class. And the responsibility of creating that environment is in the teacher's hands. The student does not do anything because he has come from a background where the culture was different, where the environment was different, and he cannot change himself to the next level. So as a teacher, I need to create that environment, and that's a slow process. The simplest thing that you can do is be friendly with them, give them confidence, tell them that questions are welcome, appreciate every question, give them some incentives. Every good question, for instance, you can give them an incentive. It can be a toffee, it can be a book, it can be a smile, it can be a handshake, it can be an appreciation. You ask everybody to applaud. That itself is, it need not be money always. So the moment the student feels comfortable opening his mouth and then asking a question or answering a question, I think you are building that, and that happens soon.
Thank you.
It happened to me today also. In the beginning, in the first 3-4 minutes, it was very difficult for me to convince you to ask me questions. But gradually, I think the participation level increased. I think I noticed it. So it was different from the first 5 minutes to the last 5 minutes. So I mean, it happens. I think if we take that